Welcome to HeartMind-ify. Before we start the show, just a reminder to share, rate, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. And please give us a 5-star rating. It helps us beat the big tech algorithms.
I'm John Izzy. Change can be difficult for a lot of us, but when we understand what makes us tick, we develop a better understanding of who we are and begin a journey of discovering our best self. Join me for a free session at johnizzy.com.
And I'm Kim Cordy, creator of the Emotion Chef Framework, an emotion management tool. Thoughts drive emotions, and emotions drive thoughts, but it's our emotions that drive our decisions and behaviors. Find out more at kimcordy.com.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Knowing each other personally and socially for the past 10 years, Kim and John have joined forces, bringing years of experience and training, providing a platform for growth and personal development, along with a little humor. John is the heart, Kim is the mind, and together they are HeartMind-ify. Well, hello, Kim. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, John. The weather has been amazing, absolutely spectacular. It always just enlivens me when we have such gorgeous weather.
Nice. Can I trade you? Because right now it's 90 degrees in DC and it probably feels like around, 98. It's so humid. And that's just because Washington's built on a swamp. So it's like, this is horrible right now.
I had a year of that kind of weather when I lived, over a year, when I lived in New York, in Manhattan, no less. And so it was hot and stinky and muggy.
Yeah, it's like
never again. That's what I say right now. I was born in California. I don't think I'm leaving. I right now live in perfect weather in Northern California. So I'm just going to stick right here and I'll let you have the humidity.
Oh, great. Thanks.
But you love where you live.
I do. I absolutely love it. I live in West Virginia, which is on the Eastern Panhandle. So it's about 50 miles from DC. So in the evening, it does get really cool here because of the mountains and everything that's surrounding. So it's absolutely gorgeous. But during the day, it can just be so humid. And it's crazy because this weekend I spent a lot of time in the saddle on the motorcycle.
Not on the horse.
Not on the horse, on the motorcycle. And we had a lot of fun, but we ran into a couple storms. And so that's always a fun surprise when the oils from the pavement rise to the top. And all of a sudden you come to a stop and you're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah. Another thing we don't have is summer rain.
Yeah, that's right. You don't have that. But we went to an oyster fest and I had pizza.
Yum, yum.
I hate oysters, so I had pizza. And was trying to keep up with the news after taking a much needed break. I realized, Kim, that with our current landscape, that I was getting so overwhelmed, and I think we talked about this, or so overloaded with opinions from everyone and everything. I was having a hard time filtering through all the sensational news stories with the real news stories. It can be absolutely exhausting, and it has been for me for a while now. So I decided to set some boundaries for myself so I can still be informed and not oversaturated. But it's tough though,
I do know. Boundaries have been a struggle for me for years. And just when I think I have them, not so much. But lucky for me, I have a fabulous friend who is the boundaries queen. I met Angie over 10 years ago. It was love at first sight. We were instantaneously friends. It was just amazing. But she is so good about boundary setting. And I have sought her out for help with this many times in these 10 years, which is why I brought her here today for this podcast. But before I introduce Angie, I just want to say to the audience is that one of the most important things about setting boundaries and learning to set boundaries is being able to communicate them. Our last podcast was about communication. So if you haven't listened to that, I suggest you do, because it goes hand in hand. But today, my dear Angie is here. Angie, thank you so much for joining us.
Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see your beautiful faces.
Yeah. Well, our listeners can't see our faces, but
it's good to hear your beautiful voices.
Good to hear your voice. I love it. That's awesome. It's good to hear you too.
Angie and I can talk for hours about lots of things, but especially boundaries, because it's a big topic. Angie, I know that you have some real key points that you're going to share today with our audience. Maybe you can kind of give us what those top 3 are.
So we're going to be chatting about individual boundaries, interpersonal boundaries, and workplace boundaries. So those are 3 different areas that we can really start to hone in on to make our life a really full and vibrant experience.
I like that. You kind of start inside and work your way out.
Absolutely. I mean, we first and foremost have control over ourselves. So we need to take care of ourselves. We need to put gas in our own car first before we start helping a friend move, picking them up from work, taking, the route to go do the gardening. Like, we got to put that gas in our own engine to keep it going and change that oil. Very important. So we got to know thyself. And with that comes knowing the things that nurture you, that support you, knowing the areas that maybe we get triggered by or where the wonk lives in our life, and how we respond to that. And so from there, we can figure out how we're going to budget our time, budget our attention and our focus, just like John did with helping to take a little break from the media so you can be present and move forward in a better way.
So talk about the wonk. What do you mean by the wonk in our lives?
So I will speak for myself, but I know that there are certain times where I'm just like, I go through and I'm like, something doesn't feel good. Like something doesn't feel right. Like I'm exhausted. Like maybe I didn't go to bed at the right time when I knew I had a big day the next day because I was distracted by something shiny. Like maybe I overscheduled myself, so I didn't eat a fulfilling meal that had the nutrients I needed to get going. I just did a grab and go of something. Or maybe I'm repeating a pattern of self-tapes that came through from childhood that did not serve me. And so those kind of things, I can see where my choices, my behavior, different built-in things within myself are not serving me. And so then I can make adjustments. So I got to know myself because there's only so many hours in the day, so much energy I have. And if I'm not here to support me, who is? I'm got to be Team Angie.
Yeah. So you're really talking about self-care then?
Self-care.
Like making sure you eat right, exercise, get your sleep, the little things like that?
Absolutely. And sometimes we can't especially for an overgiver that is used to giving to other people, we need to learn to date ourselves. So that maybe we would have taken the extra time to make a beautiful meal for our best friend that's coming over or our personal partner, and we need to put ourselves of that same priority.
So that's really difficult to do, I think, for somebody who is a giver, right? Somebody who is constantly, they live their life in service of other people. And I know for me, my whole history in my life has always been that. It's always been what I can do to help the other person. And in doing that, I've had to say, I've said no to myself for many years just because that wasn't important. It wasn't, myself wasn't important. It was how I made the other person feel or what I could do to help the other person. So it took a very long time for me to be able to set my own boundaries so that I could then give more effectively, and it would then have more meaning when I had, when I gave myself to someone else or to some activity. But that's really hard to do. So with that, all that being said, what can an individual notice when they are a giver that they're actually giving too much and it's not healthy for them? It's actually something that's not healthy.
Sure, absolutely. So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is anytime that we start feeling resentment. So that emotion is an immediate red flag where it's like, but I did this and I gave that and even that's not enough. Or we start ruminating about a certain situation or a certain thing and we go over and over it and we are not feeling good about something. Those two things are really good indicators in ourselves about when there needs to be a little beautiful boundary put in place.
Ruminating, can you explain that a little bit?
So ruminating is when you go over and over. It's like the replay over and over. And then just when you think it's done, it comes back around again. And you're like, hi, hello, Groundhog Day of the horrible emotion. And not even the whole day, just this one horrible little situation. Maybe the rest of the day was beautiful. You had loving friends. There was a gorgeous sunset. There was a cute little squirrel that ate a nut out of your hand. But then this one person, things like that.
Got it.
For a visual, rumination is a cow chewing its cud. So it chews something, it puts it in one of the stomachs, it comes back up, you chew it again, it comes back up, you chew it again, it comes back up. So it's like it just keeps coming up. I always like visuals.
Yes, and then if we are able to utilize that, because if that goes on endlessly, obviously it becomes a problem for us. But if we utilize it as a way to look at it like a replay, like they do in football, where they're like seeing, they're like, oh, see where this person ran interference here. And like, then we stumbled because we didn't do that. Next time, we know if we do X, Y, and Z, this is going to have a better end result. So if we utilize that as a way to make a new plan to really support ourselves in the future with it, that will not only help stop the continued Groundhog Day of that experience, but help you to place that boundary for the future.
There's another thing I'd like for you to share that you shared with me, which is so helpful. Going back to I'm such a visual person, which is pouring the wine in a cup and the overflow. Do you want to share that story with everyone? Because I think that is such a great way to look at taking care of yourself and then the boundaries that you need to have.
Sure. My gorgeous lawyer cousin was telling me about a law podcast speaking on a particular culture's ability to create resources, not only for themselves, but for their community, and having a certain mindset of that yourself and the family is a cup sitting on the plate of a community. And the wealth, the resources is the wine that you pour into the cup. And then when that cup is full, then it overflows into the plate. So when we fill ourselves and our family with energy and nurturing, then we have an abundance, and that goes into the community, which is the plate underneath us. But if we just pour into the plate, which is other people, our community, and it never goes back up into the cup. So you got to start with yourself first. It's kind of like, you can only run a car so far, even if it's doing great things to help people out. You got to put the gas in the engine.
I'm going to steal that, Angie, and use that in my coaching. But,
Do it.
right? I mean, that is that's really good, because I always tell clients to, at the end of their day, when they're calm, or even if it's in the middle of the day, whenever they have a moment to kind of chill out and just recap the events of the day, I always go through this list where I say, all right, what have you done for yourself? And what have you done for others? And now I'm going to say, all right, what have you done for yourself that has poured over into the community, or have you only been filling up the plate? And that's going to be a really good visual for people to see. So thank you for that. I think that's really good.
Yeah. What about your second point? What was that? Interpersonal boundaries?
Interpersonal boundaries. So this is with our family, platonic relationships, and romantic relationships. So we first need to look at our goals. So what is the purpose this relationship serves for us? So is this a reciprocal relationship? Is this a one-way relationship? Like, we really need to dive into knowing what the actual dynamics of that are. And Kim, you have this wonderful book that you wrote, A Perfect Heart, and it has this great visual where it's a fat heart or a skinny heart. And that was about, like, are we overgiving? Are we overtaking? How is the balance in our relationship? And when you are in relationship, after you're no longer with the person, do you feel recharged? Or do you feel spent and beaten down? These are very important indicators of how that perfect heart looks for that and what purpose that relationship is having.
The reason I wrote that book to begin with was because I did not have time boundaries in my relationship. We were either always together because we had two businesses, or when he was in school and I was working, we had very little time together. And there was no mindfulness as to how we spent our time, nor was there a discussion as to how each of us wanted to have our time in the relationship. It's great for me now with Andrew, my current husband. We agree. We like our independence. And so we have boundaries around, I need this time, and we both respect it. But you have to know what you want. And I think that's really key to boundaries, is knowing what you want.
Well, and it's really hard to, I think a lot of people are in survival mode. So that doesn't really allow for a lot of extra processing, because you're in flight or fight trying to make things work, right? So you're not having the wherewithal, the natural sit down and be like, well, is this really working for me? You're like, no, I'm too busy. I gotta pay these bills, and we're just trying to get food on the table. And that is all very real and understandable. But it goes back to, like, how are you feeling at the end of the day of time with that other person? Because life is hard on its own. So we need other people in our life that are on our team. And part of how we figure that out is, like, with our communication style. So in relationships, when you're having different talks, communication situations that come up, is the person that you're having these talks with, are they compassionate and willing to work on it with you and wanting to hear your side? Or do they, like, bulldoze over your thoughts and feelings? Do they blame you? Do they bait you? So do they say things that they know are gonna just, like, push you over the edge? That's a real indicator of maybe someone who's not on your team.
One of the thoughts that came to my mind, Angie, when you were talking, is that we just came off a podcast on communication. And I think it's important here to state that when emotions are involved, and oftentimes they are, even if we don't realize it, but when emotions are involved, we need to be conscious that we don't take responsibility for another's feelings. We don't want to let another's feelings dictate our own feelings or sacrificing our own needs to please someone else's needs. But the big one, and I see this a lot, is blaming others for your problems and accepting responsibility for theirs. So I stress to my clients that having a healthy set of boundaries will help during these types of conversation.
Can we cuss on this podcast? Because
Yeah.
I just okay. So I'm like, just a little check-in. So that's where it's like the know thyself, know thy own shit, know what that shit sniffs like, so that when someone else throws their little shit bomb at you, because it will happen, you're like, oh, that I know that is not a sniff that I know. I know that does not sniff like my shit. That is somebody else's shit. So I'm gonna put that back in a little baggie and hand that back to you. That's yours. And when you're ready to talk about it, we can. But that's not mine. My shit smells this way. Thank you.
So
That's
know your
great.
own,
I love it.
know your own stink.
Know your own
Yeah.
stink.
You're like, oh no.
Funny.
Not mine. No.
Anything else on our interpersonal boundaries for in the closer relationships?
Just that, when we're in these relationships, everybody has different needs of time together, times apart, and being able to respect that, and also to honor when someone has a different need from you. And so when we honor that, we get to then decide, is that relationship something that we want? Because as overgivers, we're taught to give fully to other people, no matter what, no matter who, no matter what this does for us. So what purpose does this relationship serve for us? And it doesn't mean that that person, in a really healthy way, if two people have different needs and they don't serve each other, that doesn't make another person, either one of them, bad. It just makes them not a good fit. So that's okay too. Nothing wrong with that. Plenty of people in the world.
So Angie, that's great. Thank you for that. And there's something that Kim always says to me. Well, she doesn't always say it to me, but I've heard her say it before, is this whole yes versus no. And the way she says it is really, really cool, because you never think of it. Kim, why don't you explain, when you say yes versus no, how do you say it? Because I think it's great the way you say it.
When you say yes to something, what are you saying no to?
Perfect.
Simple.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. So simple, yet so impactful.
Right. It's super. We only have so many hours in a day. We only have so much time and energy. We only have place for so many people in our life. And so we need to know what our priorities are, what allows us to feel full and abundant. And we need to get used to saying no, because no is not a 4-letter word. It's just 2 letters, 2 cute little letters. And we got to get real comfortable.
Cute letters.
They are. They're so cute. It's just real short and ready to support you in a huge way. It's the ultimate efficiency in words. Kim's favorite word is why. No's even shorter than that. You're just no. And it can be so fast and cute, and tone doesn't even have to be mean. It can just be no. That's sweet, right? No, thanks.
Yeah, very sweet.
Very sweet. And as someone hailing from the camp of overgiving for most of my life, I really had to work on practicing saying no different ways. And let me tell you, working in customer service as a concierge for a long time was a really great practice for that, because it wasn't saying no to the person. We're just saying that didn't work at the time. And so I got to really practice, and until and I made time to practice and work on that at night, saying no in different ways in the mirror. And then like one time I was like working and really like just into something, and my normal indication would be to just say yes to everything at that point in time. And I had been really working hard, and someone kind of popped in and was like, hey, would you be up for? And I was just like, no. And I was like, not even thinking about it. Like, not even, it was just my natural instinct at that point. And I was like, oh, I said no instinctively. And I'm like, actually, I can do that. But I'm just going to really celebrate right now that I like instinctually have really built in a natural response to protect my time. And I'm like, yes, finally.
Well, you know, it's funny because I became a better giver when I learned how to say no. Like I always gave growing up. It was always about the other person. And it is today too, for the most part. But now today, when I give, it has purpose that it didn't have before, because I've learned to say no, and I've learned to respect myself. And in doing so, able to respect the others that I come in contact with. So it's extremely helpful.
And going into that yes versus no in a workplace, because I think that's the next step or the next topic rather, is the workplace boundaries. Thinking about that you have to sometimes say yes for your job doesn't mean you have to say yes at home. And it's being able to compartmentalize and understand that where you have to put in boundaries. But there's also times when you get used to saying yes at work where you don't have to. I'll never forget, I was at some conference, a culture conference, and this gentleman was saying for every meeting invite he gets, he just says no, unless you can tell him what his add to the meeting is, what are his responsibilities, and to talk about, and what will be his takeaway. Like, what does he have to do after the meeting to prove that he's a contributor and that his presence is required and that he has to follow up. And he's surprised how many people really didn't need him in their meetings. They just put him in. So there's all kinds of ways to venture into the world of boundaries at work. And I think, Angie, this is your next stage. Yes. This is your next topic.
Yes, it is. And wow, kudos to him. And also we have to acknowledge that you have to be a certain level on the goal in order to ask those questions and have that as a requirement in the workforce, right? Like,
this is true. This is true. But you can work as a team to say, you know, we'll have one representative instead of the whole department. There's things that you can start to look at.
Sure. And that goes where make sure you're choosing companies that are efficient with their time too. So like it starts even in the interview process, right? So it's a two-way interview. So they're interviewing you for the job, but you're also interviewing them for like, what is their company culture? Like, do they have an employee handbook outlining protocols? How is their training? Like, do they support you in doing more training? Like, do they have a responsive management? Like, is the manager what I call like an of service manager, where they hear you and want to support you in you doing your job? Or are they kind of like, well, I've told you what to do and now go forth, you know, things like that. So we need to know what kind of culture we thrive in. But I know that even for myself, that many times in interviews, like you're just trying to focus on being like, I'm such a fabulous candidate. Look at me. I am going to be so good for you. Don't you want to give me money? And it comes down to, like, I for a long time didn't ask a lot of questions back. Like there was one time where I was interviewing for a company, and the two heads of the company, we sat for 3 hours and they asked me questions. I didn't ask them one question. Major, like that says a lot to me. 3 hours and I didn't ask them one question. It was like, wow. I needed to like reach back out and see what they were offering too, because supporting their people is a very important aspect of a job. If you're going to be spending a large sum of your waking life there, like, this is a super important thing. So I really like it when we can clarify and prioritize duties at work. So sometimes, like, I get asked to do something, and if I'm already in the middle of another project that has like a time frame on it, I'm like, hi, so I'm doing this project and I have to get it finished by this time. So is it all right if I finish this and then I'll do your project and that'll be done at this time? That's what's looking. Or is there a different priority that we need to look at here? Because then that gives them the opportunity to ask someone else to do that if that doesn't work for their timeline, or redirect the project that I'm currently working on. Because I do answer to my managers, and so it gives them a choice to see what's happening. But I'm like, I'm Angie, I have this amount of time. Use me as you need.
Yeah, Angie, but it's even more than that. It shows your manager that, or who's ever asking you, that you respect yourself and your time, and you are committed to doing something that's going to take this amount of time. And though you would love to help them, you still have to devote your time to the first task that you were handed to. So it shows them that you're able to stand up for yourself and you're able to prioritize yourself in getting work done. And I think I know when I was a manager, it was key for me to, it was great to have the yes man or the yes woman in the office, but I really preferred to work with the person who said, wait a minute, you're asking me to do this and this. Let's talk about this. Maybe we can give it to somebody else. I think that shows that you have really dealt with your own, internal stuff, and you're willing to say, I got to put myself first here, even if it's in a sticky situation. I think that's key.
Well, and I mean, it really just serves myself, it serves my manager, because they can make choices knowing that information. And it serves the company as a whole, for all of us to move as a more fluid unit. And I am so lucky at this moment. I have the absolute best boss. In fact, she tells me she's like, you're working too much. So I'm very grateful. I've reached a phase where I have like a really awesome company that I work with and for, that fully supports my boundaries. And even when I'm like maybe forgetting about my boundaries, they remind me. They're like, you need to take care of yourself. And I appreciate that. But that's where I've gotten to choose to have a company culture that has that.
And we also have to remember that as much as we think that we are invincible, we can do it all, we have physical limitations, and our productivity goes down tremendously after a certain amount of time. And so when you think that you're working hard, you're really not as productive as you could be. So when you have too many things on your plate and you're trying to do them all, and you're not honest with yourself and others about what is feasible in that time, it's not anything against you. It's just capability. And we want to be as productive as possible and give the best product. I can still remember being on a project, and this woman I worked with, she's like, I worked on the project plan till 2 a.m. And then we pulled it out and looked at it, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is crap. She's like, I don't even know what I was doing. And that's the point. We lose productivity over 40 hours in a week, over so many hours in a day. You just lose it. Even attention over more than 2 hours, you need a break.
It's so true. And also, like, I think we live in a culture that really celebrates this overworking, this workaholism, this overextending, like, oh, like you worked this many hours this week and look at how hard you work and you're a real go-getter and a type A and things like that. And really needing to regroup and reprioritize like the efficiency of work, like you were saying, with having good quality work and having a good quality life. And part of that is like knowing when we need to duck out. So if we're no longer serving our highest good or the company's highest good, like it's a domino effect, right? Like if we deteriorate, our work deteriorates, and like all across the board. So really knowing our own boundaries first, right?
Right.
I'm really listening to you because I get a lot of questions in coaching about, work and home and how do I manage that, and, the feelings of, of being overwhelmed. And one of the things that one of the clients had said to me was it seems like my marriage is not what it used to be. And I asked him how his work going. And when we got through the conversation, he was doing so much at work and taking on so much responsibility that by the time he got home, he didn't really want to deal with the family. It was like, he wasn't able to set those boundaries at work to offer him benefit at home. And, and that's just, that's a part of, I don't know, that's a part of our mentality today. It's work, 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 work. And, and learning to have those boundaries in place will make you work smarter and will help you achieve more at work and at home.
Well, and also, absolutely, I 100% agree with what you said. And also, like, as someone who also comes from the community of people with chronic health issues, we have something that's called, like, our spoons. Like, you only have a certain amount of spoons in the day, and doing certain things costs a certain amount of spoons. So, like, you're like, okay, so I have 18 spoons as a person. Like, that's how much energy I have. It takes a spoon to get up and get dressed and get out the door. It takes a spoon, you know what I mean? Like each certain thing costs a certain spoon to get through the day. At the end, there's nothing left. So, like, maybe he needs to have those 2 spoons that he needs to spend with his wife and his family to make his life great, because obviously that's something that he wants, because he's coming to you with having an issue for that, right?
Yeah.
And that means that maybe at work he does a little less. Maybe it's not so fabulous. You know what I mean? Like maybe you're the number 2 seller in the company instead of the number 1, if that's the like extra spoons that it takes to get the time with your marriage available again.
There's also, just to note, boundaries around at work for respecting the time of that you spend at the employer. You might not be able to get enough work done because you're always on your phone. You are constantly taking personal phone calls. I'm not saying that you can't take any, but a phone is very distracting. Learning how to work smarter. For instance, if you have a notification, if you know that you've gotten a call or a text, it's the same as if you had picked it up. There's a 23 to 28% chance of you having making an error or an increased risk of error just after hearing a ding on your phone. So doing best practices like putting your phone away or not having notifications come up, checking your email twice a day. If you're able to set boundaries around your time so that you can be the most productive at work and feel good about leaving at the end of the day.
This is really a great point. It goes back to like, know your triggers. So like if you know that you keep getting distracted by your phone, that phone goes into a drawer with the sound off and everything like that, right? So finding the things that help you work more productively or be more present with the people in your life and things like that. It's important to see what things take away from our quality of life with either connecting with people or in doing our work or in taking care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. I used to laugh because I would turn my phone off. When I was working on something that I had to really focus on, I would turn my phone completely off, and I would and I would turn Outlook down, or Outlook off too, so that I wouldn't get any notifications at all. And then when I turned everything back on, I saw the emails start coming in, and then the text messages start coming in. Oh, by the way, I sent you an email. Did you get it? Well, it's like people are so, people think that just because they sent you something, you have to respond immediately to it. And it's frustrating for them when you don't respond the way that you want to, and not the way that they think you should. But that's setting boundaries. That's saying that my time is just as valuable as yours. And
you can have an autoresponder that says, I am unavailable for the next 2 hours, or whatever time that you need to set aside. And I think that was smart, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that, because especially when you set expectations of that. So be like, I check my emails from the hours of blah, blah, blah to blah, blah, blah. And I will look forward to responding to you in the next 24 hours or whatever that looks like, because then there's not like, well, I just sent you an email. It's like, yep, have we reached that 24-hour mark yet? Nope. Please see original.
In the contract world, it's a service level agreement.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So you're setting expectations for a response with a service level agreement. So your autoresponder can set that.
So that's another thing that I think is a great point. An example is because I was a concierge for many years, and I would be writing and rewriting the same thing to people. And if one person didn't get it or didn't understand it or didn't see it, you could write that off to that one person. But if multiple people kept coming back with the same questions about something, then I knew that I needed to either move that piece of information up or bold it or make it or rewrite it a different way so that they could better understand, see, and hear what was going on.
That was just a really nice way to say people don't read.
Yeah, they don't.
But we're busy. We're busy.
Yeah, I know, right? My sister and I started this thing at the house because we would sit down to eat dinner, and she was on her phone and I was on my phone. And one night I said, this has to stop. If we're not going to eat together and actually have a conversation, then I'm going to go outside and eat by myself, and you can eat by yourself. So we agreed that we would not look at the phones unless it was our brother that was calling. Other than that, it didn't matter who it was. We were not going to answer it. And, and it was tough in the beginning because the phones would ding and you'd want to look, and we would hold each other accountable, and we'd kind of laugh about it. But it really helped. I mean, it helped our communication as well, too. And I got to find out what was going on in her day, and she got to find out what was happening in my day. And it was actually an enjoyable conversation.
We've trained our brains to pay attention to the ding.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why they have that term nomophobia. No mobile phone phobia.
Yeah.
And it's real.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to go back to that dinner that you had, John. Did you feel like obviously you remember that dinner probably more than other dinners because you're speaking about that one specifically now. And did you feel like you really got to enjoy your sister and enjoy that meal more?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And not only that, we cooked it together, which was, it was pasta, of course. We always eat pasta. We're Italian, whatever. But it was pasta, and she was making sauce, and I was getting noodles together and the salad together. And, we were putting everything together, and we sat down and we were like, wow, this is really good. And we just, had a really nice conversation. I'll never forget it. It was a great night. And now we have many more of those because we've agreed to use that time for ourselves and not for everybody else.
Look at you, boundary badasses. I love it.
Damn right. There was something that you said, Angie, and before we end, I just want to say thank you so much for your words of advice and your insight into boundaries. But there was something that you mentioned in the beginning about, I think it was mind budget or spirit budget. And I thought that was really interesting because I know next week's show, Kim, what are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about body budget.
There you go.
And yes, we need so much energy, but more importantly, our brain, which is the CEO of the body, it's the master, we depend on it for life. And if it doesn't have its energy, we really fail. So we're going to talk about body budget, what it is, what are things that bring us energy, and what are things that take it away. I call them energy fairies and energy vampires. We'll have some fun talking about it. It's a different concept. I've used this a lot in my classes and talking with people, and everyone's always interested in that. And it lends itself to good communication and proper boundary setting.
I love it. And just so that our users are aware, Kim this week is being defined as the fair-minded astronaut.
Yes. So that Squadcast names me every week, and this is my name. And
so
I
you are the
like
fair-minded
this best.
astronaut.
Yes, and I am. So that's Ms. Astronaut to you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, Angie, thank you so much. I really, oh my gosh, we both really appreciate it. I really appreciate you and appreciate your insight this week. It was really, really beneficial for me, for my coaching, and I know for our listeners as well.
Well, thank you so much for saying yes to me, because I know you had to say no to everybody else.
Sleep. I had to say no to sleep.
and that dog I was supposed to say no to is made his way into the room, and I'm scratching his ears. So,
well, great,
thank you
everyone.
Again.
Thanks, and we'll talk to you next week, all.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.
New shows are available every Saturday right here on HeartMind-ify.podbean.com or wherever you listen. Kim and I would like to thank each and every one of you for allowing us to be a small part of your life. Be kind to yourself and remember, our hearts tell the story, but our mind is the conductor.